My family forced me into a marriage with a man I had never touched, never spoken to, never even looked in the eyes while I was pregnant with another man's child. I thought the stranger would resent me. I thought he would break me. But the truth that haunted me from the moment I met him was this. He was the only person who stayed, and the one I was most afraid to love. I used to believe. The worst pain I'd ever felt was the moment Liam vanished, the moment the man who swore he cared about me heard I was pregnant and simply dissolved into silence. But I was wrong. The real fracture in my life happened 2 weeks later, when I stood in my father's study in rural Pennsylvania, holding my breath while he looked at me like I was an inconvenience he needed to remove. My stomach wasn't even showing yet, but the shame already felt carved into my skin. And then he said it. You will marry the man I've arranged for you. Someone respectable. Someone who won't ask questions about the child. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I didn't even beg. I just stood there, 23 years old, exhausted, humiliated, scared, and too numb to realize how fast my father was erasing my future. The man he chose was a widower named Caleb Mercer, 36, owner of a vineyard hours from the city. Quiet, withdrawn, a man who apparently lived far enough from society that no one would ever think to ask why his new bride was already pregnant. He won't pry, my father added like it was some kind of blessing. He understands responsibility, as if what he meant wasn't silence. I felt like livestock being handed from one owner to another. So, one late August afternoon, I boarded a bus headed toward Willow Creek, a small town tucked between rolling hills and endless rows of grapevines. My suitcase was light. My fear was heavy enough to crush me. When the bus pulled into the dusty station, I saw a man waiting beside an old pickup truck, a man I recognized only from a low-resolution photo my father had shown me in passing. Tall, broad-shouldered, shirt sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows, a paper bag in one hand and a bouquet of wildflowers in the other. Like this was a date and not a transaction binding two miserable people together. That was Caleb. He didn't stare at my stomach. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He simply stepped forward and said in a low, even voice, "Sophie, I'm Caleb Mercer. I'll take you home." Home, the word made something cold crawl up my spine. I followed him to the truck in silence. The drive through the hills felt surreal, the setting sun burning orange across the vineyards, while an old jazz tune played softly from the dashboard. I didn't know what scared me more, the future I was being forced into, or the quiet man sitting beside me, steady as stone. His house was simple. A wide porch with chipped white paint, a hammock tied between two maple trees, a dog who trotted up and wagged her tail at the sight of him. "This is Maple," he said, gesturing toward the dog, then led me inside like this was something he had rehearsed. He showed me to a spare bedroom, my sister's old room, with clean sheets and a glass of water on the nightstand. Then he stepped back and added, "If you need anything, just knock." No interrogation, no judgment, no accusation, just space. Too much space. Almost. I stood in the lavender-papered room, feeling like an intruder in a life that wasn't mine, a ghost hovering at the doorway of someone else's world. And for the first time since Liam disappeared, I broke a little. Not from grief this time, but from the terrifying gentleness of it all. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my side with my hand over my stomach, whispering a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll figure this out. I won't let you grow up unloved." Morning came, and with it, the strangest kind of normal. Caleb made scrambled eggs and toast, placed a plate in front of me without comment, poured me tea instead of coffee, and nodded once when I whispered thank you. No pressure, no questions, just presence. Days passed like that, quiet, slow, bearable in a way I didn't know how to process. I kept my distance. He kept his. He worked long hours in the vineyard, boots crunching across the gravel at sunrise while I sat by the porch trying to write down thoughts I wasn't ready to speak aloud. I noticed small things. He never slammed a door. His dog adored him. He always left the porch light on after sunset even though I never went anywhere. And the more I watched him, the more one truth scared me. He wasn't unkind. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't impatient. He wasn't anything I had expected. And somehow, that terrified me more than if he had been. Because a cruel man is easy to harden against. But a gentle one is dangerous when your heart is still bleeding. The quiet in Caleb's house wasn't the kind I grew up fearing. It wasn't the silence that comes before anger or the silence that hides disappointment. It was a softer kind, open, patient, almost spacious, yet somehow that made it harder to breathe. I didn't know what to do with a silence that didn't demand anything from me. I wasn't used to existing without someone waiting for me to fail. In the mornings, I'd wake to the sound of Caleb moving outside, boots crunching across the gravel, the low clink of tools, Maple's cheerful bark. I'd lie still for a few seconds, listening, feeling strangely safe and guilty at the same time. The guilt came from knowing he wasn't responsible for any of this, not my heartbreak, not the pregnancy, not the choices my father made on my behalf yet. He was the only one who seemed to be carrying the weight of it with me. One evening, I sat on the back porch watching the sun slip behind the vineyard, the sky turning orange and violet in long brush strokes. Caleb came out quietly and sat beside me, leaving a respectful amount of space. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The air smelled faintly of earth and ripening grapes. Finally he asked, "Do you feel okay today?" Not prying, not invasive, just human. I hesitated before answering. "I think so. I just get tired easily." He nodded, accepting the answer without digging for more, and for some reason, that made emotion rise in my throat. He didn't ask for the story behind my tiredness, why I couldn't sleep, why I cried without sound, why some days my chest felt like it was held together by thin threads. He let me hold my own pain until I chose to hand it over. The next afternoon, I wandered too far into the vineyard and lost my bearings among the identical rows. Panic hit fast, the kind that starts in your stomach and spreads like cold water through your limbs. My breathing quickened, my vision tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. And then I heard it, Sophie. Caleb's voice, steady, calm, cutting through the rising fear. He found me standing still, frozen between two rows of vines. Instead of scolding, he handed me a cold bottle of water. "It's easy to get turned around out here your first week," he said. "You're okay, no judgment, no frustration, just reassurance and that quiet steadiness again." That night, he knocked gently on my door. "Take it easy tomorrow," he said, leaning lightly against the frame. "Don't push yourself." He paused like he wanted to add something but didn't. I almost wished he would. When he walked away, the soft click of the door felt louder than anything he had said. It lingered in my chest long after the sound disappeared. A few days later, Caleb's sister showed up, Erin, energetic, talkative, and so full of warmth that she filled the kitchen the moment she stepped inside. "So you're Sophie," she said, setting down a basket of peaches. "You're prettier than Caleb told me." I blinked. "He talked about me?" Erin laughed. "Well, as much as he talks about anything. He said you were respectful, quiet, and thoughtful. That's basically love poetry coming from him." I felt my cheeks warm in a way I wasn't prepared for. After Erin left, I found Caleb fixing a loose board on the back fence. I brought him a plate of sliced peaches. He took one look at the dish and murmured, "She didn't overwhelm you, did she?" I shook my head. "She's kind. She makes things feel normal." He didn't respond right away, but his eyes softened in a way that made my heart stutter. "You deserve normal," he said quietly. That sentence stayed with me long after I walked back to the house. That night, I moved my suitcase into the closet. I didn't unpack it, just put it away, out of sight. No longer ready at any moment to run, I began noticing the small gestures, the way he always left the porch light on after dusk, how he brewed 2 cups of tea in the morning even before I came downstairs, how he made sure the fridge always had fruit and crackers, things he must have Googled for pregnant women because he certainly didn't know them on his own. None of these things were dramatic, none were romantic. They were thoughtful, intentional, quietly protective, and it terrified me. Kindness with no agenda is disarming. It undoes knots you didn't realize were holding you together. It makes you aware of how fragile you are and how easily someone like him could become a place to rest. One evening, as I wrote in a small notebook letters to my unborn child, promises I wasn't sure I could keep, Caleb stepped onto the porch and sat beside me again. "Sophie," he said gently, "do you want to be here?" My breath stalled. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was an honest question from a man who didn't want to trap me. A man who wanted me to choose this life, not endure it. The truth trembled out of me. "I don't know, but thank you for letting me figure it out in my own time." He nodded once, accepting my uncertainty with the same calm he accepted everything else. That night, I slept without crying, but the fragile peace didn't last. The morning after that, when I opened the mailbox at the end of the dirt road, I found a letter. No return address. My name scrawled across the front in a handwriting I once knew by heart, slanted, messy, unmistakable. Liam. And in that instant, the life I was slowly learning to breathe in trembled. The letter sat in my hand like a pulse. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. I walked back toward the house with the envelope pressed against my palm, the paper thin but heavy with everything I thought I had escaped. Caleb was fixing a hinge on the screen door, glancing up at me with that calm, steady look of his. "Everything all right?" he asked. I swallowed, forcing my voice not to shake. Just. Male, he nodded and didn't push. But his eyes lingered a second longer than usual, as if he sensed something shifting in the air inside the house. I sat at the kitchen table and finally tore open the envelope. The handwriting inside was rushed, familiar, desperate. Sophie, I'm sorry. I need to see you. I made mistakes. I'm coming. My stomach twisted so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. Liam hadn't just resurfaced, he was on his way here. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the faint creaks of the old farmhouse, the soft hum of the refrigerator, Maple's quiet footsteps down the hall. Everything in this house had become a rhythm I could rely on. Caleb rising before dawn, the scent of brewing tea, the porch light glowing warm no matter how late it got. And suddenly, the thought of Liam stepping into this space, into this quiet safety, felt wrong, violating. The next morning, I found Caleb in the barn, sorting equipment. I stood there longer than I meant to, trying to find the right words. When he finally turned, I blurted, Liam wrote to me, his hands stilled, not frozen, just paused, like he was giving the moment respect. And he asked gently, he says he's coming. Caleb didn't look angry. He didn't look threatened. He looked concerned. Concerned for me, not about me. Do you want him to? He asked. His voice was steady, but the question hit me harder than any accusation would have. I don't know, I whispered. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was clawing its way up my throat, and I was too afraid to look it in the eye. The next days dragged like a taut wire ready to snap. I kept expecting the sound of tires on the gravel road, a knock on the door, a ghost wearing human skin. When it finally happened, when the rumble of an engine echoed across the vineyards, I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. Caleb was already walking toward the porch before I could speak. I followed, heart pounding. Liam stepped out of a dusty car like he had just driven through regret and hope at the same time. He looked thinner, tired, but not enough for me to forget the nights I cried alone because of him. His eyes landed on my stomach first, then on me, then on Caleb. Something tense flickered across his face. I needed to see you, he said. His voice trembled, not from nerves but from entitlement. I stood straighter. You left, I said quietly. You didn't even hear me out. Liam's jaw tightened. I panicked. I'm sorry, but I want to fix things. I want to be with you, with our baby. He took a step forward and Caleb stepped half a step closer to me, not blocking, not confronting, just standing with me. Liam's eyes snapped to him. You're the husband. Caleb nodded once. And you're the man who left her. His tone was calm, but the truth in it cracked the air between them. Liam scoffed, defensive and wounded. This isn't your business. Caleb didn't move. She's my wife. Her well-being is my business. Wife? Liam spit the word as if it burned. This was arranged, forced. She doesn't want to be here. My breath caught. Caleb didn't look at me, didn't demand an answer. He just said softly, she'll speak for herself. My heart twisted. Liam turned to me. Sophie, you don't belong here. We can leave, start again. His voice, his urgency, his assumption that I was still his to claim. Something inside me cracked. I shook my head slowly, clearly. You came back because you felt me slipping away, I said. Not because you've changed. His face drained. He knew I was right. I'm not going with you, I said, this time without shaking, without doubt. I'm not choosing the man who left me when I needed him most. Liam stood there, chest rising and falling, breath unsteady. And for the first time he didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, he murmured. Then he walked back to his car, and the sound of his engine faded into the hills until it was nothing. I didn't move until Caleb stepped closer and asked quietly, Are you all right? His voice was soft, careful, as if he wasn't sure I would still choose to stand next to him now that the past had been exorcised. I took a slow breath, then another, and finally I nodded. I'm okay, I said. For the first time, I'm okay, and Caleb exhaled. A breath so deep I realized he had been holding it for days. The morning after Liam left, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had been bracing for a storm and were now finally allowed to relax. I walked into the kitchen to find Caleb already there, pouring hot water into a mug. He glanced at me, uncertain, as though he still expected me to say I was leaving too, but I wasn't. I knew that now. Caleb held out the cup. Chamomile, he said. You slept too little. His gentleness hit me harder than anything Liam had said or done. I took the cup, our fingers brushing lightly, barely a touch, but enough to make something inside me settle quietly into place. Weeks passed. They were peaceful, almost startlingly so. The vineyard ripened under early autumn sun. Maple followed me around like she had decided I belonged there. Aaron visited again, bringing jars of homemade jam and unsolicited sisterly advice. She talked to my belly like she was already an aunt. "Caleb's calmer now," she whispered conspiratorially one afternoon. "He's been different since you came," I laughed, embarrassed. "Different how?" Aaron grinned. "Hopeful." The word warmed me in ways I didn't want to examine too closely. I wrote in my notebook almost everyday messages to my unborn daughter. Promises I wanted to understand before I spoke them aloud. And through it all, Caleb stayed a steady presence, never demanding, never assuming, but unfailingly there. Then, one crisp evening in late October, my body tightened with a pain that stole my breath. It wasn't the small twinges I'd felt before. This was sharp, real. A wave that rolled through me and left me gripping the edge of the table. "Caleb," I whispered, and he was at my side in seconds. He didn't panic. He didn't waste a moment. He helped me into the truck, his hand firm but steady on my back. Every mile to the hospital felt like an eternity, but Caleb spoke to me through every contraction, grounding me with quiet reassurances. "I'm here. You're all right. Breathe." When I gripped his hand so tightly my nails dug into his skin, he didn't flinch. "Hold on," he murmured each time. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours blurred into pain and fear and anticipation. Then finally a cry, small, sharp, powerful, a sound that rewrote something inside me. The nurse placed my daughter on my chest, and everything in the world softened. "She's perfect," I whispered, tears blurring my sight. Caleb turned away slightly, but I saw the tremble in his shoulders, the way he blinked too fast. "Do you want to hold her?" I asked. He hesitated, as if afraid he wasn't allowed. Then he nodded. He held her like she was made of light, and when her tiny fingers curled around his, he let out a stunned breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "She's incredible," he whispered. "We named her June. When we brought her home, the vineyard looked almost golden." Caleb drove slowly, like every bump mattered. That night, when I woke to June's small cries, I found Caleb asleep in the chair beside the crib, head tilted back, exhaustion softening every line in his face. I watched him for a long moment. This quiet, steady man who had never claimed me, never demanded anything from me, never tried to shape my life into something that suited him, had stayed. Through uncertainty, through fear, through everything. Later that night, after feeding June, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. Under the warm light, with my daughter sleeping against my chest and the house filled with a peace I had never known, I wrote. Love didn't arrive loudly. It didn't warn me. It grew in the quiet, the way vines grow even when no one watches. I was afraid of the gentle man, until I realized he was the only one who never asked me to be someone else. When I finished writing, I walked to the doorway where Caleb slept. I touched his shoulder lightly, and his eyes opened halfway. "Sophie," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. I felt my throat tighten. "I choose this," I whispered. "I choose you." He blinked, stunned, then sat up slowly. "Are you sure?" I nodded, tears burning hot. "Yes." Caleb exhaled a breath that felt like an unspoken prayer, finally answered. Then he stood, brushing a gentle hand against June's back. "I'm here," he said softly. "For both of you, always." For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something I could walk toward with them.